Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the book of Ruth. Yesterday we began our study and we noticed that this book occurs during the time of the Judges, and it revolves around a family from Bethlehem in Judea who are forced by economic disaster to move to Moab. It's a time of famine, and so this family has to relocate to the land of the Moabites, who are actually enemies of Israel. It shows how economically deprived the times were. Now let's read a little bit more about this family and how they moved, and then what happens to them once they arrive there. We begin at verse 2. Now the man's name was Elimelech. His wife's name was Naomi. The names of his two sons were Mahlon and Chilion. So we have this family of man, his wife, and the two boys. They were from Bethlehem in Judah, and they went to Moab to live there. Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her two sons. They both married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other named Ruth. After they had lived there for about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her two sons or her husband. Disaster seemed to follow this family. They were forced to move to Moab, hoping to provide a better life there. And they do, and live there for a number of years, about 10 years it says. But after they arrive, the husband, Naomi's husband, dies. Now her two sons, as they grow up, they take over the care of the family, and they both marry Moabite women. But then both of them die. Talk about disaster. They had to move because of economic deprivation. And now death has claimed the three men of the family. And so all that's left is these three women, Naomi and her daughters-in-law, Ruth and Orpah. Now keep in mind, in ancient times, it's a patriarchal society. The men lead the clans and the families, and women are dependent upon men for their livelihood. So a little girl growing up obviously is a part of her father's household, and he cares for her. But then when she marries, she becomes a part of her husband's household, and he cares for her. In her old age, if she has sons, her sons will care for her. But now what would happen if you lost the men in your life? You were left destitute. Now, Naomi's in a foreign land. Her husband has died. Her two sons have died. She depended on her husband for support. And then, of course, her sons. But now that her sons are dead, you have three widows, Naomi and her two daughters-in-law, without men to support them. That, in ancient times, was a recipe for economic disaster. You depended on the men in your family, your father when you were growing up, your husband after you were married, and your sons when you grew old. They would care for you. They would take care of the family and the clan as the family grew. But women were especially in desperate need if they lost the men in their lives, their husbands or their sons. So Naomi, Orpah, and Ruth are in desperate situation. Their structure to support them is gone because the men in their life have died. This is why, for instance, in the Old Testament, there's special emphasis placed on caring for the widow and the orphan. Now, the reason there's such an emphasis on the widow and the orphan, those are the ones who are most deprived in society. A widow without her husband, especially doesn't have any sons, would be economically destitute, unable to make her way in the world. So widows and orphans are especially cared for. Now in Moab, you have three widows. And Naomi is a foreigner. She is not Moabite. She's from Israel. She has no one to help her. And Ruth and Orpah are in the same situation because they have now joined Naomi's family, so they're considered Israelite by the country. There's no one to care for them. Economic disaster is coming. So what are they going to do? What are they going to do? Naomi knows nothing but disaster in her life. She's lost her husband. She's lost her sons. Economic catastrophe is on the horizon. What are they going to do? At this point, Naomi decides she's got to go back to Israel. She's got to go back to the land of Judah, make connection with her extended family there, maybe find some help. She's been gone for 10 years now. It's been 10 years since they moved to Moab. Now she's preparing to go back. Now, tomorrow's lesson, we're going to look at how she makes preparation and goes back and what she tells her daughters-in-law to do. We will look at that tomorrow. So join us for our next session in our 5-minute Bible study in the book of Ruth.